It's so good to see you again.
It's nice to be seen. We're usually just a nebulous mist.
So I saw you back in February when you were up in Austin, and I sat in the hot seat, and it was like going down the interstate in this chair at 100 miles an hour. And it was...
Scary?
No.
Exhilarating? Then there must not have been resistance on your path.
And I was probably high for 3 weeks afterwards. Sometime in the mid-1980s, I was not quite awake and I was not quite asleep. And I heard a voice tell me to go to the University of Texas and major in radio, TV, film. And my life to that point had been...
So you know that voice was speaking from your vortex. And it was speaking from the point of view of what you had been living and what you had been asking for. So it was a culmination of understanding of who you really are. It wasn't something outside of you dictating to you what you should do. It was an affirmation of what you had been stating in many ways for many years that you wanted. And you were in a moment of clarity. That's that state of being where you're not quite awake and not quite asleep. But the most important thing about that moment in time is that no resistance within you, so that you were vibrationally up to speed, and you could actually translate those vibrations into clear thought that said, good.
It was a woman's voice, and it was...
Well, you are the interpreter of that. In other words, you're the interpreter of that. And that just means you think women are smarter than men.
You mean they're not?
The path of least resistance is the way you interpret things. So you may have had mentors who were female or whatever. There may have been more love and reassurance in what feels like a woman to you. It doesn't really matter. And
at that point, I was at a point in my life where I was feeling very frustrated, and I thought, you know, what the hell have I got to lose? And I did it, and I graduated, and it was an incredible experience. And I lost my way after I graduated from the University of Texas. I just kind of lost my way.
One of the things we just have to stick in here, just to sort of speed things up a little. Okay. Something that we want you to know about your inner being is that your inner being never looks back. So your inner being is not looking back to the time that you heard that voice or looking back to the time that you lost your way. Your inner being understands that through what you would call good times and bad times, through times of clarity and times of confusion, that in all of that sifting and sorting, you're launching rockets about what you prefer, and your inner being is always looking forward to that. So you really don't need to spend a lot of time justifying where you now are based upon any of that stuff. It really kind of slows you down.
Well, I'm not really trying to justify it as much as...
Why are we having this discussion? We're not contradicting you. Right. Just explain to us why you think that we all need to hear about a time that you are not now. Because your inner being knows where you are now in relationship to what you want, and that's what's pertinent, that's what's relative.
Well, I feel like I have found my way again.
Yes?
I don't feel lost.
That's wonderful. Then why are we talking about a time you felt lost?
So what I want, well, looking for evidence, just looking for clues about what I can do better, what I can improve on.
Oh, but that's not how it works.
Okay.
That isn't how it works, because when you look at the clues that were the stumbling blocks, they recreate themselves in your now unnecessarily. Okay. Years ago, we tell this story often. It's a really good one. Jerry and Esther were in Orlando. Navigational systems were new. Jerry had been the previous navigator. Now Magellan is. And Esther's driving, as she almost always was. And Jerry said, you know, we're going in exactly the opposite direction of what we mean to do. And Esther said, no, we're not. He said, yeah, we are going in the opposite direction. And Esther said, but I programmed it in and I did everything that the navigational system told me to do. That can't possibly be. And Jerry said, we're going in the opposite direction. So Esther said, all right, I think we should go back to where we started. I'll reprogram the machine again, and we'll watch, and we'll find out if it's a programming error in the program or if I just made a wrong turn. And Jerry said, or we could just start where we are and go where we want to go. But you see, Esther had lost sight of what mattered. She'd lost sight of just wanting to go where they wanted to go. She was still trying to justify her rightness, her goodness, her cleverness, her clarity. She was trying to justify that she had not made a mistake. We want you to give all of that up. Who cares? You do, we know, but your inner being does not need justification from you about where you are, because your inner being adores where you are and adores what's in your vortex and is leading you continually to what you prefer. Helpful?
Very.
And so,
what could you recommend as a process or a practice that would help me focus more on what I'm aiming for?
the most important thing to notice, it's a really good question. How can I know? First, let us ask you a question. Do you understand the concept that we are presenting about a vibrational reality that you've already created?
Yeah.
So therefore, does that mean that you know that what you want is already known by the larger part of you and that you're just trying to figure it out?
Correct.
So do you think that you don't know what you want, or do you think that you just don't know the path to what you want?
I'm having trouble finding the path.
So you sort of know what you want. You just don't exactly know how, where, when, who. You think you know what you want. We want to say to you that you don't know clearly everything that you want because it's so nuanced and you've been putting it in your vortex for so long, and there are so many cooperative components that have gathered that it's a rare one of any of you who can look forward into your vortex and articulate really well what you want. Mostly you just know it when you see it. Mostly you just feel the resonance with it when you're moving in the direction of it. So understanding that your inner being knows, and that the better you feel, the more on that path you are, then you may be able to come to the conclusion that the process that you're looking for is just whatever feels really sure-footed and good to me. The better you feel, the more clarity you feel, and so forth. We've been talking for a long while about your emotional guidance system and how when you're at your most not allowing of yourself to be with your inner being, you feel despair. That's where grief and despair and all of those really heavy, empty feeling emotions are. And when you are most in alignment with your inner being, that's when you feel frisky. That's when you feel full of fun and clarity and love and life and vitality. And so along this emotional scale, with all of these emotions, exactly in the center of it, when Esther was first receiving, like you heard that voice all those years ago, when Esther was in the mode of receiving these vibrations which caused her to write these words of these emotions on this emotional scale, when she received our vibration for the one right in the center, the word that she wrote was contentment. Today, with a little nuanced understanding, she would find the word satisfaction. Contentment, satisfaction, right there in the center of that. So what that means is, if you feel despair and you focus upon something that makes you feel revenge, you've moved up the emotional scale, because there's more power in revenge than there is despair. Still a terrible place to feel, and you're still pretty pinched off from your inner being, but you are moving in the right direction. Well, when you continue to move up that emotional scale and you get to satisfaction, in satisfaction there's no resistance. That's where you were when you were describing that moment in time when you weren't quite asleep and you weren't quite awake. You were in that place of satisfaction where you weren't romping with clarity, but you didn't have any resistance going on either. And when you are in the state of satisfaction, that's when you first crossed over that line. That fulcrum is right there at satisfaction. And when you're right there, you could move into dissatisfaction or satisfaction. There's so much control right there. Just like being at the top of that hill, you got control before there's any momentum. So if you begin to focus on wanting to feel satisfaction. That means that you are more in control of which way you go, because it's easy to choose a satisfying thought or a not satisfying thought. But if you let a little bit of momentum go, then you are without choice. You're at the bottom of the hill. You just got to wait until the law just sort of causes the culmination of the momentum that is underway. You really have to get a good night's sleep or have a nice long meditation. Or it's possible you could be in strong negative emotion and you could talk to someone who's tuned in, tapped in, turned on, and if they are willing to focus with you enough from their state of not looking at where you are but holding you as your inner being, and their inner being are holding you, knowing who you really are and what you really want, someone could talk you out of it. But if we were standing in your physical shoes, we would not be asking anyone to talk us out of our funk. We would practice the art of satisfaction enough that we mastered it. Because then what happens if you find satisfaction in this moment, and then another, and then another, and then another? If there's no resistance, that satisfaction, because your inner being is calling you, and in your satisfaction, here's the operative word: when you are satisfied, you are a cooperative component. How about that? When you're satisfied, you're a cooperative component. Now you're gettable by your inner beingable. In other words, your inner being can call you easily from satisfaction into interest, into clarity, into eagerness, into passion, into love, into life, really, you see. So when we say start with something easy, that's really what we mean.
So like maybe playing with one of my cats, or petting them with one of them in my lap, or
anything that feels satisfying. What it really is, first, it's an understanding of the concept. Imagine a cork floating and you hold it under the water. Let's call that resistance. That's resistance. But when you let go of it, it's going to bob right back up to the surface, because its natural state and your natural state is that vibrational buoyancy. Your natural state is in sync with your inner being. As humans, you work pretty hard at talking yourself out of that buoyancy. Your parents said, look at these things that went wrong. I want you to always remember these things that go wrong. And I want you to be guarded against these things that go wrong. And they don't mean to do you damage, but if they can convince you to focus upon enough things and to become enough of a cooperative component to enough things that you don't want, you're going to in time come to the conclusion that you're not worthy, or that good things don't come to you. You teach yourself that disconnection. So when you say, what's a process? The most important thing that we want to convey to you is that the power of the resources of your inner being is so much greater than the power of the resources of negative disconnected energy, that it doesn't take very much of a clear moment before you start moving in the direction of who you really are. And once you put two and two together, once you begin to associate the way you feel with your state of alignment or not, allowing resistance, feeling good, feeling bad, alignment, not alignment, in sync, not in sync, allowing, cooperative component, not allowing, not cooperative component. Once you get all of that clear in your mind, then it's easy. It takes a little awareness. You have to own how you feel. And you have to accept that how you feel means something. And you have to accept that how you feel is not punishment. It's not your inner being forsaking you. It's you pinching yourself off from something that you want. Helpful?
very.
Want to talk about it in some real terms?
Sure.
Go for it. Now remember our goal. Our goal is you're going to find something that you feel some great or slight dissatisfaction about. Better if you start with something with slight dissatisfaction. If you start with something with great satisfaction, it'll be a much longer conversation. But if you start with something with slight dissatisfaction, it's easy.